The press conference in the main lobby of Ellington Maritime was wrapping up when a reporter repeated a question that had already been asked. Margot Ellington, the CEO, paused at the microphone. High above the polished marble floor, some 40 feet up, a man in a gray work jacket stood on a maintenance ladder, replacing a bulb in the massive chandelier. That man was Hayden Wexler, a widower with one young son, employed in facilities. Margot's gaze found him. She spoke into the microphone, her eyes fixed on him directly. I have said it before, and I will say it again. I do not marry men who already have children. Some statements are determined before you ever have a say. Hayden remained motionless. The atrium gradually emptied. Reporters packed their equipment, exchanged business cards near the brass doors, and moved on. The marble flooring, buffed to a shine that morning, recorded their footprints and released them. Margot lingered at the podium for a moment after the formal proceedings ended. She didn't look up again. Hayden descended the ladder one careful step at a time, unhurried. Reaching the bottom, he folded the ladder, picked up his tool bag, and walked the long diagonal across the lobby toward the service hallway. His shadow briefly crossed hers in the center of the atrium. Neither acknowledged it. He drove a 14-year-old pickup out of the employee lot, heading north toward Wagoner Terrace. The radio stayed off. At a stoplight on Rutledge Avenue, his hands tightened on the steering wheel once, then relaxed. He collected Jude from the after-school program at 3:20, asking about a spelling test. Jude said he'd missed the word absence by one letter. Hayden acknowledged that it was a difficult one. By 8 o'clock that evening, a 19-second clip had started circulating on Charleston Twitter. The framing was tight, focused upward. The CEO's face wasn't visible. Only the man on the ladder, his back to the room, holding a bulb in his right hand, completely still from the moment the question began until the words ended. White text along the bottom read, "The dignity of the man who didn't flinch." By midnight, the post had reached 400,000 views. Hayden read it once, standing in the hallway outside Jude's room. The boy was asleep, a navigation atlas spread open on his chest. Hayden closed his phone. He considered what any kind of attention could cost. He had brought Jude across 2 states to reach Charleston. He had carefully built his cover here. One viral clip was the sort of thing that could unravel everything. He stood there for a long while, then went to the kitchen, put the kettle on, and stayed. In a glass office 20 floors above King Street, Margot watched the same clip on mute, 3 times. She wasn't looking at herself. She was looking at the man behind her, at the bulb in his hand, at the absolute stillness in his shoulders. She tried to name what she had felt when she looked up. She couldn't. The next morning, her communications director presented 3 options: apologize on camera, stay silent and let the story fade, or reaffirm the statement and pivot to quarterly numbers. Margot listened, then said she would handle it herself. At 9:40, she took the freight elevator down to the technical floor. Her stated reason was a thank you visit for long hours during the press event. The excuse was thin. She knew it. She went anyway. She found Hayden alone in a service room, replacing filters on an HVAC unit. He didn't look surprised, didn't look anything. I owe you a private conversation, she said, about what I said in public. He kept his hands on the bracket. You don't owe me anything, ma'am. I was changing a bulb. His voice was level, not cold, not bitter, just level. That was worse. She walked back through the atrium, looking up at the chandelier. The bulb was bright and new. At the end of the day, Delphine Marrow knocked once at her office door, placing a brown envelope on the desk. Don't sign anything Ford sends you this week, she said. I'll explain when I can. Margot opened the envelope after Delphine left. Inside was a photocopy of an internal report dated 2007. At the bottom, in handwriting she hadn't seen in 23 years, was her father's signature. The building was nearly empty by 9 p.m. The cleaning crew had finished the lobby. 2 security guards traded shifts at the front desk. Margot stayed in her office, working through a quarterly review packet that should have taken 2 hours but was taking 6. When she sent a third document to the printer down the hall and received an access denied tone, she didn't call IT. She picked up the file, took the stairs down to the technical floor, and went to the freight printer, the only one still spooling. Hayden was closing the workshop when she entered. He wasn't on a ladder this time, he was just a man at the end of a shift, sleeves rolled, a scrape on his right forearm from a wall bracket. He didn't greet her by name. He nodded once, set down a wrench, and cleared a stack of conduit off the work table so she could place her papers. "Coffee?" he asked. She hadn't expected the question. "If you have some." He poured from a stainless thermos into a chipped white mug, offering no sugar. She took it and drank. The coffee was strong and slightly burnt, the way coffee gets when left on the warmer too long. She set the mug down next to a green spiral notebook. The notebook was open to handwritten notes, case numbers in federal docket format, a column of dates in 2022, a name circled twice, Caldwell. She turned her face away from the page. "Where did you study engineering?" she asked. Hayden didn't look up from the schematic he was rolling. "I didn't. I studied law." She waited. Department of Justice, Fraud Section. Port and maritime work, mostly. I left 3 years ago after my wife passed. He said it the way one states a fact about the weather. He didn't say why he had taken a facilities job after the Department of Justice, or why at Ellington Maritime. She didn't ask. He glanced at his watch. "I have to get Jude from piano." She nodded. He pulled on a jacket worn smooth at the cuffs and left her with the printer. The 2007 file was 41 pages. She watched it spool one sheet at a time, like watching something you don't yet know how to hold. Halfway through, the name Rutherford Caldwell appeared in a wire transfer authorization. It appeared again on page 19, and again on page 33. She gathered the pages and walked back through the building toward the front lobby. She would have passed the bench by the elevators, except the boy was on it. Jude was reading the navigation atlas open on his knees. He looked up when she stopped, unsurprised. "You're the lady from the screen," he said. She didn't sit. She wasn't sure she could. "My dad said you were brave. He said most people don't say things to your face." He didn't think it was about him. She didn't know how to answer a child speaking about something he shouldn't have had to see. Hayden came around the corner with his keys in hand, took it in at a glance, and put his hand on Jude's shoulder. "Time to go, bud." Before they walked away, Jude reached into his coat pocket and held something out, a small stone, gray-blue, smooth all around. "This one matches the gray you wear. It's a good one." He didn't wait for her to thank him. He walked off with his father. In her car at a red light on Calhoun Street, Margot opened her phone. The clip was at 400,000 views. The top comment, from a verified Charleston journalist, read, "Does anyone know who the man on the ladder was?" She didn't reply. She took a screenshot. 2 days later, the quarterly review convened in the boardroom at 10 o'clock. Margot put the audit motion on the table herself. The North Charleston terminal acquisition had closed at a figure she couldn't reconcile against the prior quarter's cash position. She wanted an independent review of the wire ladder before the next filing. Ford Caldwell didn't object loudly. He sat at her right hand, hands folded, and said the company was at a delicate moment with its stock, and that an unnecessary external audit would signal instability to rating agencies. 3 of 7 board members nodded. 2 had been seated in the last 14 months, both introduced by him. The vote was 4-3. Margot lost. In the hallway afterward, Caldwell walked her halfway to her office. "I watched the clip," he said, the man on the chandelier. "Have you considered how that lands for us? A quiet resolution would be a kindness to everyone." He smiled when he said kindness. She didn't answer. She kept walking. In her office, she closed the door and pulled up vendor records. The system gave her a standard error, access limited. She tried again with CEO credentials. Same error. Pre-2019 records were sealed against her. She went down to the technical floor at 6 o'clock. Hayden was at the workbench replacing a damaged ballast. He looked up once, then back at his hands. "I have a problem," she said. She didn't ask for help. She gave him room to refuse. He didn't refuse. He wiped his hands on a rag, walked her to a second terminal, and pulled up facilities access logs. "Badge entries to the file room," he said, timestamped, independent of the main vendor database. If a system admin changed records, they had to swipe in unless they used a service account. Look for unusual swipes first. She didn't ask how he knew this, or why he was helping. He pulled up a stool for her. "If you want plausible deniability," he said, "don't sit in this chair." She sat. They worked for an hour and 40 minutes without talking much. He brought her water once. She nodded thanks. The pattern emerged in the second hour: 3 audit files accessed and modified between 1:50 and 2:15 on the last Tuesday of 3 consecutive months, each time from Ford Caldwell's administrator account, each time without a corresponding badge swiped to the file room. She sat back in the chair, saying nothing. He let her sit. When they walked out to the staff lot, Jude was asleep in the back seat of the pickup, cheek pressed against a backpack, the truck's heater running. Margot looked at the boy through the window. Something in her shifted. She didn't name it. Hayden closed his door softly. "Sunday," he said, "Folly Beach. Jude wants to show you where he found that stone." He said it casually, but he waited a beat too long for her answer. "I'll check my calendar," she said. They both knew what that meant. She called Delphine from her car at 9 p.m. The call went to voicemail. She drove past Delphine's building on the way home, slower than necessary. The lights in the corner unit on the 3rd floor were on, staying lit past midnight. Margot watched them once in her rearview as she turned onto Broad Street and went home. Sunday at 3 o'clock, Folly Beach. Margot parked 20 yards from Hayden's pickup. She didn't get out for 10 minutes, looking at her hands on the wheel until the small muscles in her shoulders relaxed. When she walked down the access path, Jude was already on the wet sand with a plastic bucket. He waved with the seriousness of an air traffic controller. "Stones first," he said, "then shells. Stones are harder." He explained the rules: round, dull at the edges, nothing sharp, nothing too dark. He held one up against the gray sky as a comparison. "This is the wrong kind, too rough. You can tell because of the edge." He set it down with great care, as if rejecting it kindly. Margot listened as she would in a board meeting. Hayden stood a few yards back, hands in his coat pockets, the coat worn through at the cuffs, watching her listen. She laughed once, a small, real laugh. Hayden caught it. She caught him catching it. Both looked at the water. After half an hour, Jude ran ahead along the tide line, a stone in each hand. Hayden fell into step beside her. They walked 30 yards before he spoke. "Why CEO?" She thought of a corporate answer and discarded it. "Because no one else could be trusted to keep my grandfather's company. He built it assuming the family would hold it. I'm what's left of the family." He nodded, understanding without comment. He had understood before asking. "Why this job?" she asked. He looked at the water. "It lets me be close to my son, and it's quiet enough to think." He didn't say the other half. She didn't press. A long way down the beach, near the pier, a man with a telephoto lens lowered it after the 3rd shot. Hayden saw him before Margot did. He shifted his stance by a quarter turn, his shoulder coming between Margot and the line of sight, bending to pick up driftwood as if examining it for Jude. Jude saw it and ran over. The photographer left after another minute. Margot had seen the shift. She didn't comment. On the drive back, Jude fell asleep in the back seat with the bucket on the floorboard. In the parking lot, Margot's sedan sat next to Hayden's truck. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I owe your son a thank you," she said. "For the stone." He nodded. Neither stepped closer. In her car, on the bridge back to the peninsula, her phone buzzed twice. A local Charleston culture blog had posted a piece 8 minutes earlier, CEO Ellington spotted with Chandelier Man at Folly Beach. The photograph was from the pier. Margot's face was clearly identifiable. Hayden's was turned just enough to obscure it. She gripped the steering wheel, the leather cool and real. She didn't text anyone. She drove home and placed the gray-blue stone on her windowsill, where it caught the streetlight. She suspected Caldwell had assigned someone to watch her. She would know within 48 hours. Monday morning at 11 o'clock, an emergency board session Caldwell convened with 24 hours' notice. He had a folder in front of him when Margot walked in, opening it before she Saturday. "This is Hayden Wexler," he said. "Until 3 years ago, an attorney with the Department of Justice, Fraud Section. He left during an internal review I haven't been able to fully reconstruct. His wife died in a single car accident on Route 17 in 2022. The investigation closed without findings. He's been employed by this company for 2 years and 11 months in facilities management." He set down the folder. "I raised this because the CEO appeared in a viral clip last week, made a public statement, and was photographed yesterday on a beach with the same employee and his child. I'm not making accusations. I'm asking the board to consider whether the optics are compatible with the trust placed in her judgment." He looked at the table. 2 board members wouldn't meet Margot's eye. "I propose," Caldwell said, "that audit oversight be temporarily transferred to me pending a review of the CEO's executive conduct." He smiled slightly when he said review. Margot didn't stand. 72 hours, she said. "I'll give the board a written response in 72 hours. No vote before then." She left, going down to the technical floor. Hayden wasn't there. The workshop was locked. She checked her watch, 3:15 on a Monday. He was picking up Jude from piano. She called his cell from the stairwell. "Coffee," she said, "East Bay." 40 minutes. He didn't ask why. He said yes. The cafe on East Bay was small. The woman behind the counter recognized Margot and didn't say so. Hayden was already there when she arrived, in a corner booth, 2 cups of coffee untouched. She sat, not wasting a word. "The board put your file on the table this morning. I'm not asking because I doubt you. I'm asking because I don't want to hear it from Ford Caldwell." He looked at her a long time, the same expression he'd given the chandelier, calm, almost still. "I'll tell you," he said, "not here. Tonight, after Jude's asleep." She nodded. While they sat, a black sedan rolled past the front window, then again, slower the second time. Hayden saw it both times. He didn't turn his head. He took a sip of coffee he didn't want, set it down, and shifted half a foot to the left, his shoulder blocking the view from the street to Margot's face. She caught the movement, said nothing. They left separately. He went to pick up Jude an hour early. She drove the long way around the peninsula, watching her mirrors. She didn't see the sedan again. That didn't mean it wasn't there. Hayden parked a block from her building and walked the last 200 yards, empty-handed. Her apartment was small and uncluttered, a long oak table separating the kitchen from the living room. She had set out 2 cups and a teapot, no food. He sat with his back to the door, as she would have if she were him. The tea cooled while he talked. "My wife was Anna Wexler, financial reporter for the Beacon Atlantic. She'd been working on a money laundering ring routed through container traffic at the port of Charleston for almost a year. I was working the same ring from the federal side out of Atlanta. We didn't share notes, we couldn't. She was 3 days from filing the story." He paused. "She died on Route 17 on a Tuesday night. Single car. Investigators called it driver fatigue. The car had been serviced 6 days earlier. The mechanic wasn't available to interview, he'd moved to Florida that month." Margot didn't speak. "I left the department 4 months after she died. My name had been leaked internally. Continuing the case meant Jude was reachable. I made the only choice I could. He sipped the tea. I came to Charleston on purpose. The ring ran through this company's containers. I didn't know if you were involved. I knew one name for certain, Rutherford Caldwell. She didn't flinch. He placed a folded printout on the table, smoothing it once. This is the last draft email Anna sent her editor. She never sent the next one. The story would have been filed off the source identified here, given a code name. I read this email 400 times in the last 3 years. I read it again last week. After Delphine gave you that envelope, I looked again. The code name was a single word. It's her. Delphine was Anna's source. She's been silent for 3 years. Margot put her hands flat on the table, palms down. She didn't cry. She didn't move for a long time. I made a vow on the record, she said. I want you to know I didn't make it to you. He didn't answer with words. He set his right hand on the table next to hers, leaving a space no wider than a thumb's breadth. He didn't close it. They sat there. The tea cooled completely. The street outside was quiet. Somewhere, a refrigerator cycled on. Neither moved their hands. Neither spoke. Outside, a car passed. Inside, the small clock above the stove kept time. The space between their hands stayed exactly as it was. Margot was at Delphine's door at 6:40 a.m. Delphine opened it in a long blue robe, eyes swollen from crying without sound. Come in, Delphine said, as if expecting her, though not at this hour. Margot didn't accuse. She sat in the armchair by the window and said one name, Anna Wexler. Delphine's knees gave way, she caught herself on the sofa and sat down hard. She talked for a long time about 3 envelopes passed to Anna in 2022. Container manifests with serial numbers mismatched to customs filings, internal memos on a shell company called Tidewater Holdings, a wire ladder photocopied in her own office at 2 a.m. over a month. About the call from the Beacon Atlantic 3 days before Anna's deadline, telling her Anna had been killed in an accident on 17. About her granddaughter Eliza at College of Charleston, then Medical University, then residency, every step funded by a trust Ford Caldwell controlled. About the math she had done at her kitchen table the week after Anna died, and what she had chosen. I thought he would never find Charleston. I thought we were safe from him at least. Margot didn't interrupt. When Delphine was empty, she went to the bedroom and returned with a small flash drive, setting it on the coffee table. All of it. Anna's files, plus what I've kept since. Margot took it to her own laptop. The folder structure was clean, methodical, the work of someone preparing for this morning for 3 years. Halfway through, she found a file she hadn't expected. A scan contract dated April 2007, 2 signatures at the bottom, Ford Caldwell and her father. She read it twice. The terms were direct. A payment of $1.5 million in exchange for vacating the Ellington residence, surrendering any claim to family assets, and undertaking not to return to South Carolina. Her father had signed it. He hadn't left her mother for another woman. He had been bought. Margot sat with the laptop on her knees for a long time. The vow she had spoken into the microphone last week, the vow she had carried most of her life, had been built on a story arranged by the same man now trying to push her out. She closed the laptop, picked up her phone, and called Hayden. She said one sentence, "You were right, and I was wrong about more things than I knew, including my father." He asked if she was safe. She said yes. He said he was on his way. When he came, she was standing at Delphine's living room window, watching a delivery truck unload across the street. She didn't turn right away. He stopped one step behind her. "I need your help," she said, not turning. "Not because I'm afraid, because I want to do this the right way." "Then we do it the right way," he said. The plural arrived gently. She heard it. They went out together. Delphine stood at the open door, hand on the frame. 3 years of fear weren't gone from her face, but they had shifted. "Your mother would be proud," she said. Margot didn't trust her voice. She nodded once and walked to the car. In the 48 hours before the board reconvened, they moved their work to Margot's apartment. Her office on King Street wasn't safe, her email had been quietly mirrored in the last 6 months. They worked at her kitchen table with the blinds half drawn. Hayden called a name from his old life. Patrice Lindholm, a deputy assistant attorney general in Atlanta when he left, still in that role. He called her cell at 7:15 a.m., speaking for 90 seconds. He didn't promise anything or ask her to. He said a package would arrive through a secure channel by 10 o'clock, she should look at it before lunch. She said she would. He wasn't a lawyer anymore, but he still knew how to hand evidence to the right person at the right hour. Margot worked on her own ladder, drafting 3 memoranda. One to each board member she could still count on. Each was different, each said exactly enough, none gave any board member enough information to become a target. The second night, Hayden brought Jude over. Their apartment wasn't safe anymore. He checked the hallway camera wiring that morning and found a splice. He told Jude they were having a sleepover at the Lady with the Stone. Jude was asleep on the couch under a blanket by 8:30. Margot tucked the blanket over his shoulder. Hayden watched from the kitchen doorway. Neither stepped toward the other. The quiet stretched for 10 or 12 seconds, then a kettle clicked off and Hayden poured 2 cups. They didn't say anything important that night. They didn't need to. At 11 p.m., Hayden's old colleague called back. The package had reached the right desk. The Atlanta office had opened a preliminary file. No announcement until things moved further. He thanked her and hung up, not telling Margot until morning. He didn't want relief settling in her shoulders before she walked into the boardroom. At 4:11 a.m. on the day of the board meeting, the camera outside Margot's apartment went offline. Hayden saw the gap in the feed when he checked at 5 o'clock. He didn't wake Margot. He carried Jude out the back door at 5:20, wrapped him in his coat, and drove him to the house of a retired investigator in Mount Pleasant. Sam Drennan had taught Hayden surveillance evasion at Quantico 15 years earlier. He asked no questions, nodded once, and took the boy inside. Hayden returned to Margot's apartment at 6:40. She was already dressed. They left together. In the car on the bridge toward downtown, at a red light, he put his right hand on her wrist for 3 seconds, saying nothing. She didn't pull away, didn't look at his hand when he lifted it. She looked at the road. The light turned green. The boardroom at 11 o'clock the next morning. Ford Caldwell sat at the head of the table, his folder open. 7 board members were seated, 2 assistants stood at the back. The blinds were open to King Street. Margot didn't enter alone. Delphine walked in behind her with a stack of bound documents under her arm, followed by 2 outside counsel from Atlanta in dark suits. Patrice Lindholm had sent her 2 best. They sat without being introduced. Caldwell began to speak. Margot set a single sheet of paper on the table. The 2007 contract, his signature at the bottom, right side up, where everyone could read it. She didn't raise her voice. 18 years ago, you paid my father $1.5 million to leave his family and not return. 3 years ago, you paid a much higher price to make a reporter disappear. Today, you will sign your resignation in front of these 3 attorneys, or I send all of this to the United States Attorney's Office in Atlanta by noon. He tried pressure. Talked about stock, about jobs at the North Charleston terminal, about the family name and what it would mean to her grandfather. He talked for almost 2 minutes. She didn't respond. She slid the paper 1 inch closer. Old Whitfield stood first. He had been at her grandfather's side in 1978. He pushed back from the table without a word and walked to the wall by the window. The second board member stood within 30 seconds. The third, after a longer hesitation, stood, too. They formed a small line by the window, like men declining to be photographed. Caldwell looked at them, then at the attorneys from Atlanta, then at his pen. He signed. The outside counsel had the resignation pre-drafted, the conflict of interest acknowledgement, the surrender of corporate authority. He signed all 3 in the order they were placed. When the attorneys escorted him out, Margot didn't watch him go. She looked out the window into the hallway beyond. Hayden was there, hands in the pockets of a gray work jacket worn at the cuffs, not in the room he didn't need to be. He had stayed where he was useful, 2 doors down, where he could see both ends of the hall. He met her eyes through the glass and nodded once. The papers were filed by close of business. The press release went out at 4 o'clock. By day's end, the federal investigation had moved from preliminary to open case. 6 weeks later, early autumn in Charleston. The light had thinned, the air gone clean, the breeze off the harbor carrying marsh scent in the evenings. The federal investigation was formally opened. Ford Caldwell was under house arrest pending indictment, passport surrendered, accounts frozen. Ellington Maritime stock had dipped for 10 trading days, then recovered. Margot was still CEO. Delphine was still corporate secretary, having moved her desk nearer the window of her own accord. Margot had given a second press conference in the same atrium. She hadn't apologized. She read one sentence into the microphone and stepped down. Some sentences are written before you arrive. Most of them are wrong. The chandelier had been rebulbed by someone else weeks earlier. Sunday afternoon, Folly Beach, 3 o'clock. Jude had decided Margot needed to learn the 5 types of seashells. He had a system, laid them in a row on a piece of driftwood, pointed at each, said its name twice. Margot listened with the same focus as a board meeting. Hayden walked a few yards back, not rushing to catch up. They returned to the cars when the sun was halfway down. Jude climbed into the back seat of the pickup and was asleep before the truck left the lot. Margot and Hayden stood at the tailgate, shoes full of sand, sat on the asphalt. He looked at her. You can still hold that statement. Nobody has to walk it back for you. I don't hold things that aren't true anymore, she said. He extended his hand, open, palm up. She put her hand in his. The inch between them was gone. They stood there. The boy slept in the truck. The sky turned the color of the inside of a shell. Delphine had begun walking the perimeter of the cemetery in Magnolia on Saturday mornings, not saying why. Margot didn't ask. Some things didn't need asking. They drove back across the bridge that evening, the truck behind her sedan, windows down. At a red light at the foot of the bridge, Margot looked in her rearview and saw Hayden looking at her. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. Neither had been looking for this. Neither had chosen any of it. But some sentences, once written, can be quietly unwritten in a parking lot at the edge of the sea by 2 people who finally told each other the truth on the windowsill of an apartment in Wagoner Terrace. A gray blue stone caught the last of the light.